The first scream hit at 9 a.m. and made my framed CPA license tick against the wall. I told you the embargo lifts at noon. If you leak this before the press release, I will personally ensure your server farm melts down. My cursor froze mid-cell. The decimals on my screen stopped behaving. I hate noise. Noise is messy. It's unstructured data. It's a variance in the quiet equilibrium I need to hunt down missing decimals in a forensic audit. In Studio 4A, quiet is the one asset I can't expense. So when the woman in Studio 4B started screaming in the middle of a weekday, I didn't just feel annoyed. I felt a physical disruption in the force of my concentration. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a scream of professional fury. I told you the embargo lifts at noon. If you leak this before the press release, I will personally ensure your server farm melts down. Her voice vibrated through the exposed wall studs, insulation, and old brick, and rattled the framed CPA license on my desk. I stared at my spreadsheet. The numbers were blurring. I was trying to trace a shell company through a labyrinth of Cayman Island transactions, a job that required surgical mental silence. This woman sounded like she was negotiating a hostage exchange with a megaphone. I stood up. I'm not a loud man by nature. I prefer to let evidence do the talking, but I have limits. I walked out of my office down the polished concrete hall and stood in the open doorway of 4B. It looked less like an office and more like a renovation zone. A mattress was wrapped in plastic on the far side of the room. Work lights were set up on a tripod, and half the wall was stripped down to studs and insulation. Press kits were teetering on a desk anyway. A whiteboard was covered in red marker. And there she was, Joanna Cook. I knew her name because Alan, the building manager, had warned me she was high voltage. She was standing in the middle of the room, phone pressed to her ear, wearing a plain white tank top and holding a large square of black acoustic foam like a shield. One arm lifted, she pointed at the exposed wall studs like they were the enemy. Her dark hair was falling out of a clip, messy and wild. She slammed the phone down on the desk. She looked at me, breathing hard. Her eyes were sharp, dark, and immediately defensive. "Can I help you?" she asked. "You can stop yelling," I said, keeping my voice low and level. The walls in this building are historic, which means they have the sound-dampening properties of a wet paper towel. I can hear you breathing, let alone threatening to melt server farms. She blinked, then gestured with the foam square. I'm in crisis PR. Loud is part of the job description. When a client's reputation is on fire, I have to be the siren. I'm a forensic accountant, I countered. Silence is part of my job description. When a client's money is missing, I have to be the ghost. She looked me up and down. I saw her register the gray t-shirt, the stubble I hadn't had time to shave, the general look of a man who hadn't seen the sun in 3 days. "Well, ghost," she said, shifting her grip on the foam. "I'm trying to fix it. I bought all this acoustic foam. I don't know how to put it up without ruining the brick." She held up the foam panel again, looking at the wall with genuine frustration. She said, "I need more soundproofing for my room." I quoted deadpan. She looked at me, a spark of challenge in her eyes. I replied, "You're yelling like that." I almost smiled. Almost. If you want the noise to stop, you need to install that properly. Adhesive spray won't hold on this texture. You need a frame. I don't have a frame. I have deadlines and a headache. She dropped the foam on a chair. "Look, I'm sorry. I'm having a bad week. My operating account just got flagged for suspicious activity, and I can't pay my vendors. So I'm screaming to keep from crying. Is that acceptable to the audit committee?" I froze. My brain trained to latch onto keywords snagged on flagged and suspicious activity. "Who flagged it?" I asked. "First Citibank. They said an auditor filed a suspicious transaction report. It's ridiculous. I run a clean ship. Auditors don't file reports based on ridiculousness, I said automatically. We file based on patterns. Are you analyzing me now? She crossed her arms. I'm offering a trade, I said. The decision was logical. If I helped her, the noise stopped. If I fixed her bank issue, the stress screaming stopped. Efficiency. I know how to build a frame for that foam. I have tools in my truck. I'll soundproof this wall for you. She raised an eyebrow. And what do I have to do? Stop breathing. Let me see the freezing notice. Her defensive posture tightened. Why? Because if it's a standard algorithm flag, I can write you a template letter to clear it in 20 minutes. If it's a targeted audit, you're in trouble. She studied me for a long moment. I stood still, letting her assess. I wasn't trying to charm her. I was presenting a contract. Competence for silence. Fine, she said, reaching for a folder on her chaotic desk. But if you mansplain my own bank account to me, I'm going to scream louder. Deal. 2 hours later, my office was abandoned, and I was in hers. I had gone to my truck. I kept a basic toolkit there because I'd renovated my own townhouse last year and brought up my level a drill and some spare timber furring strips I'd been meaning to discard. The dynamic between us was tense, but productive. Joanna wasn't the type to sit back and watch. She held the wood while I drilled into the mortar joints, never the brick you can't patch brick, and she handed me screws before I asked for them. She was observant. You handle that drill like a surgeon, she noted, watching me drive a screw flush with the wood. Precision matters, I said, in numbers and in carpentry. If you're off by a millimeter here, the foam bows. If you're off by a decimal in my line of work, someone goes to prison. You're intense, Nikolai. She used my name. I hadn't realized I'd given it to her. I'm focused. There's a difference. We finished the frame. I showed her how to slot the foam panels in so they created a seal. As the wall turned from jagged red brick to soft dark charcoal foam, the acoustic quality of the room changed. The echo died. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded closer, warmer. Okay, she said, dusting sawdust off her hands. Wall is up. Silence is achieved. Your turn. She handed me the letter from the bank. I sat on the edge of her desk, wiping my hands on a rag, and read the document. It wasn't a form letter. It was signed by a specific compliance officer. Simon Vane. I knew that name. You know him? She asked, watching my face. I know of him, I corrected. He's a forensic auditor for the bank's internal risk division. He's ambitious. He doesn't flag accounts for typos. He hunts trophies. I flipped through the attached transaction log she had printed out. It was a mess of small payments, freelancers' print shops, venue deposits. PR work was death by 1,000 receipts. Here, I pointed to a recurring transfer. $5,000 every Friday to Apex Consulting. Who is Apex, my web development team? She said immediately. They handle the SEO for my crisis campaigns. Do you have invoices? Of course. Somewhere. She gestured vaguely at a pile of paper. Joanna, I said, my voice dropping into professional seriousness. This transfer goes to a routing number in a region known for shell entities. If you don't have a signed contract and itemized invoices matching these exact amounts, Simon Vane is going to say you're laundering money. Her face paled, making the dark circles under her eyes stand out. I'm not laundering money. I'm just disorganized. I do the work. I don't obsess over the filing. Disorganization is indistinguishable from fraud to an algorithm, I said bluntly. And Simon Vane feeds on disorganization. She looked at the wall we had just built. So I'm screwed. My account is frozen until he decides to unfreeze it. I have a payroll to meet on Friday. The desperation in her voice hit me. I looked at the foam. Acts of service. I had fixed the sound. Now I had to fix the signal. No, I said. We're going to audit you before he does. We're going to build a paper trail so solid he breaks his teeth on it. She asked softly. I looked at the chaos of her office. I hated chaos. But looking at her standing there fighting a war she didn't understand, I realized I hated the injustice of it more. I need my quiet, I said, standing up. And I can't have you screaming at the bank manager all week. Get the Apex invoices. I'll get my laptop. The next 2 weeks were a strange blur of proximity and friction. We fell into a routine that shouldn't have worked, but did. By day 3, the problem wasn't just the bank. It was everything the bank's freeze touched. A vendor email landed in her inbox with the subject line in all caps, "Final notice." Then, another event canceled, if not paid. Her phone started buzzing with freelancers asking if their invoices were safe. Joanna's instinct was to fight it the way she fought everything, volume first, persuasion second. I stopped her before she could hit dial. Put it in writing, I said. No calls, no improv. If this goes sideways, we need a record. She stared at me like I'd asked her to stop breathing. I run on calls, she said. You run on outcomes, I corrected. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Cook_compliance. Inside it, I created subfolders with dates. I slid a cardboard banker's box under her desk and wrote on it with a black marker, "Receipts do not mix." I made her print the bank's freeze notice, the transaction log, and her last 3 monthly statements. I stapled each packet, wrote the date in the top right corner, and took a photo of it on my phone. Redundancy isn't paranoia, it's procedure. Then I drew a simple grid on her whiteboard. Payroll, rent, vendors, clients. Friday, she said, tapping the word payroll like it might explode. I know, I said. We're going to buy time without begging. I drafted 3 short emails for her, one to her landlord, one to her top vendors, one to her staff. No drama. No excuses. Just facts. The bank had placed a temporary compliance hold. An outside forensic accountant was preparing a formal appeal, and any contract cancellations would be met with a written dispute and a documented timeline. Joanna read them jaw tight. This makes me sound small, she said. It makes you sound controlled, I said. Controlled reads as innocent. She sent them. By lunch, her landlord replied with a 1-week extension in writing. 2 vendors agreed to hold their work for 10 days if she provided a documented plan. Her staff replied with something that looked like loyalty. That night, Simon Vane left his first message. It came from a blocked number. I could hear the smile in his voice through the speaker. Ms. Cook, he said, smooth and pleased. If you cooperate, this can be resolved quickly. If you don't, we'll have to notify interested parties of the risk. Joanna's eyes flashed. Her hand tightened around the phone. I put 2 fingers on the back of her chair. Light pressure, not a command. A reminder. Do not answer, I said quietly. She exhaled through her nose. Then she hit save. Interested parties, I repeated when the voicemail ended. That's not compliance. That's optics. It was the first time I saw her look genuinely cornered. He's going to call my clients, she said. Let him, I said. If he does, he creates a trail we can use. She looked at me, waiting for the part where I offered comfort. I didn't. I offered a plan. From now on, I said, any communication from the bank gets forwarded to me. Any pressure gets documented. And any time you feel like screaming, you tap that wall and make coffee instead. Joanna held my gaze for a long second, then nodded once. Fine, Ghost, she said. Show me how you hunt. In the mornings, I would work in my office on my actual paying clients. At lunch, Joanna would knock on the wall, thump, 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 the signal that she had coffee. We would sit in her soundproofed room. She drank something that smelled like burnt hazelnuts. I drank black tea. "I heard you on the phone with the senator's aide," I said one Tuesday, leaning back in her guest chair. "You were ruthless." She smirked over her mug. I was persuasive. He wanted to bury the story. I told him if he buried it, the smell would eventually attract wolves. I offered him a shovel to plant a tree instead. "Metaphorical shovel press conference," she corrected. "How's the audit grim?" I admitted. "Your record keeping is a tragedy, Joanna. You have receipts stuffed in shoeboxes. It's a system. It's a fire hazard." I opened my laptop. But I found the chain. Apex Consulting isn't a shell company, but they use a third-party payment processor that looks like one. We need to get a sworn affidavit from their CFO confirming the nature of services. "I can get that," she said. "I can talk anyone into anything." "I know." I watched her for a second. She was wearing a blazer today, sharp and professional, but she had kicked her heels off under the desk. There was a run in her stocking near the toe. It was a small human detail that made me pause in a way I didn't expect. She wasn't just loud. She was vivid. She fought for her people. I watched her talk clients off ledges, spin disasters into opportunities, and protect her staff from abuse. She was a shield. I was just the guy checking the bolts on the shield to make sure it didn't crack. On Friday evening of the third week, the threat escalated. I was in my office packing up when I heard the door to 4B slam. Not a scream, a slam. Then silence. The silence was worse. I walked over. Joanna was sitting on the floor, her back against the soundproofed wall, her knees pulled up. She held a letter. "He froze the personal accounts too," she whispered when she saw me. "Simon Vane?" "He expanded the freeze to my personal savings. He says there's commingling of funds." I sat down on the floor next to her. The carpet was industrial and scratchy. "Is there once," she admitted, voice shaking. "Last year. I needed to cover a venue deposit for the charity gala, and the business transfer hadn't cleared. I used my personal card and reimbursed myself later. It was $5,000. And you didn't document the reimbursement as a loan repayment. I just transferred it back." She looked at me, eyes wet. I didn't know it mattered. "Nikolai, I can't pay my rent. I can't buy groceries. He's choking me out." She looked small. Joanna Cook never looked small. She was a force of nature. Her lashes were wet. A tear slid down and caught on the edge of her jaw like it didn't know where to go next. For 1 second, I stayed standing. My hand hovered like a failed reach. Then I did the thing I never do in the middle of a case. I closed my laptop. I pushed the power button until the screen went black. I sat down on the dirty floor beside her. The grit caught on my jeans. The industrial carpet scratched my palm. I didn't correct it. "He's doing this to force a settlement," I said, my voice cold and hard. "He wants you to admit to negligence so he can slap you with a fine and close the case as a win. It's a bullying tactic." "It's working," she whispered. "I'm scared, Nick. I've built this agency from nothing for 10 years. If this leaks, if my clients think I'm financially unstable, they'll leave. Trust is all I sell." Then we stop him. Howie has the bank behind him. "He has a policy manual behind him," I said, "and I know it better than he does." I stood up and offered her a hand. She took it. Her grip was strong, her palm warm. I pulled her up, and for a second we were standing close. Too close. I could smell her perfume, something like vanilla and old paper. I looked at her mouth and then forced my eyes up to hers. "We're going to counter-audit," I said. "I'm going to trace every penny that went in and out of your accounts for 5 years. I'm going to build a chain of custody so airtight that if he tries to poke a hole in it, he'll break his finger. That's weeks of work, she said. You have other clients? I'll work nights. Why, she asked, searching my face. Why would you do that? Because you built that wall with me, I said, nodding at the foam. And I don't leave a job half finished. I stopped sleeping. The next morning, I changed the room the way I change a case. I taped a clean sheet of paper to the inside of her door and wrote in block letters, "No phone calls with the bank without me present." Then I set up a second box next to the receipts one. This one got a label too, Evidence Chronological. I printed screenshots of every email thread with the bank. I printed Vane's voicemail transcript. I printed the vendor extension agreements Joanna had secured. Each printout got a date, a time, and a staple. I wasn't building a story. I was building a record. Joanna watched me work for a while, then finally spoke. You do this like you're preparing for trial. Because this is trial, I said. Compliance is just court with nicer chairs. On day 6, Vane tried a new angle. He didn't call Joanna. He called Alan, the building manager. Alan knocked on my door with a cautious look and a tablet in his hand. Mr. Kim, he said, you have a visitor situation. In the hallway, a man in a suit was standing too close to Studio 4B's door, reading the nameplate like it offended him. He wasn't carrying a badge. He was carrying a folder. 2 building tenants were already pretending not to watch. Simon Vane didn't look surprised to see me. He looked irritated, like a line of code had produced an unexpected variable. Mr. Kim, he said, voice pleasant. I was hoping to speak with Ms. Cook. You can speak with her through counsel, I said. He smiled. She has counsel now. She has me, I said. And she has options. Vane's eyes flicked to the foam panels on the wall inside 4B. He leaned in, lowering his voice, as if we were sharing a secret. All this effort, he said. For a woman who can't keep her books straight, you should be careful. When this goes, public proximity looks like participation. That was the insult. Not to me. To her. I stepped a half-pace forward, blocking his view of her door without touching him. Calm authority. Zero theatrics. Say it on the record, I said. Send it in writing. Otherwise, you're just a man in a hallway trying to scare a small business owner. His smile tightened. I'm here to deliver a request for an immediate interview, he said, tapping the folder. And a notice of intent to close accounts within 72 hours if she continues to withhold cooperation. Slide it under the door, I said. Vane hesitated, annoyed by the lack of reaction. No, he said. I need her signature acknowledging receipt. Then you don't get one, I said. I took out my phone and opened the camera, not as a threat, just as a habit. Alan, to his credit, turned slightly so the hallway security camera had a clean angle. Vane looked at the lens. He looked at Alan. He made a calculation. Fine, he said, and slid the papers under 4B's door anyway. When he turned to leave, I added one more line quiet enough that it didn't feed the crowd. You don't get to turn compliance into a shakedown, I said. Not on my watch. He paused. Then he walked away, without looking back. Inside, Joanna was standing a few feet behind the door, arms folded face hard. You recorded that? She asked. Hallways have cameras, I said. And now so do we. For the first time since this started, I saw something in her expression shift. Not relief, respect. Okay, she said. Tell me what to do. So I did. We rehearsed for the hearing the way I rehearse a deposition. Joanna practiced answering questions with 10 words instead of 100. I practiced staying flat because flat makes bullies loud. Every night, the evidence box got heavier. For the next 10 days, My life was divided into two modes: day mode, where I pretended to function for my own firm, and night mode, where I sat in Joanna's office swimming through digital records. Joanna stayed too. She didn't understand the forensic software, so she did what she did best: logistics. She managed my environment. She noticed I rubbed my left temple when the spreadsheet glare gave me a headache, and the next night, a glare-reducing screen filter was on my monitor. She noticed I forgot to eat, so she started placing food next to my mouse hand, silent, non-intrusive. A sandwich, a slice of fruit. One night at 2:00 a.m. a storm was hammering the warehouse roof. The rain was loud, but in her room it was just a distant hum. I found it. "Got you," I muttered. Joanna looked up from the sofa where she was reviewing press releases. What the discrepancy? Vane flagged a deposit from Galahad Ventures as suspicious income. I turned the laptop toward her. "Look at the metadata." She frowned, then leaned in. EIN is marked high risk because Galahad went through an old bankruptcy. I clicked open the bank's case portal. The system tags the EIN. That part is real. What's not real is what Vane did with it. I opened the attachment package the bank required for the appeal. The bankruptcy explanation letter was there. The vendor refund documentation was there. It was all the boring paper that keeps businesses alive. Then I pulled up the access log. A plain list: file name, user, timestamp, action. I scrolled until I saw it. Bankruptcy_explanation.pdf user s.vane action. Opened November 13th, 9:42 a.m. Duration 00077 seconds. He didn't miss it. He touched it and moved on. Joanna's mouth went slightly open. That's him. That's bad faith," I said. My voice stayed flat, but my jaw tightened. "He opened the explanation file and froze you anyway. He wanted the leverage more than the facts." Joanna came behind my chair to see better. She leaned in close enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder near my neck. Vanilla, faint and clean, cut through the stale coffee and printer toner. She was in my space. I noticed it, and I didn't step back. She read the line again, slower. Her fingers brushed the edge of the chair, steadying herself. "So he's not careless," she said. "He's doing it on purpose." "Yes," I said. "And now we can prove it." I didn't turn. I didn't let my body follow the thought. I kept my hands off the keyboard for a beat, then placed them on my knees like a restraint. "We print this," I said. "We walk into that room with math and a motive. He can argue risk. He can't explain malice." She didn't move away. Not immediately. "Okay," she said, voice low. "Printing. I'll get the paper." I could feel her hesitation. Then slowly she pulled back. "Right," she said, her voice sounding a little breathless. "Printing. I'll get the paper." The hearing was in a glass-walled conference room at the bank's headquarters downtown. It was designed to intimidate. Polished mahogany table view of the skyline air conditioning set to morgue. Simon Vane sat at the head of the table. He was younger than I expected, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck. And he had the smug look of a man who trusted software more than people. Ms. Cook Vane said, tapping a file, "We've reviewed your appeal. While we appreciate the enthusiasm of your explanation, the commingling of funds and the unverified income sources are significant risk indicators. The bank is moving to close your accounts permanently." Joanna sat straight. She wasn't wearing the messy tank top today. She was in full armor, a navy power suit, hair sleek, eyes hard. "Mr. Vane," she said, her voice projecting clearly without yelling. "I understand your risk assessment models are rigid. However, rigidity is brittle. I'm not here to debate philosophy, Vane said, checking his watch. No, she said. You're here to look at the math. She gestured to me. I stood up. I placed a thick-bound document on the table. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. My name is Nikolai Kim, I said. I am a certified forensic accountant. I have performed a full retroactive audit of Ms. Cook's personal and business finances for the last 60 months. Vane blinked. You hired an outside forensic. I hired the best, Joanna said, not looking at me. Continue, Mr. Kim. I opened the document. Turn to page 14, the Galahad transaction. You flagged it as suspicious income because the EIN is tagged high risk after an old bankruptcy. The tag exists. Your freeze wasn't about the tag. It was about what you ignored. I have attached the bankruptcy explanation packet and refund documentation. Vane frowned and flipped the page. Now turn to the access log appendix, I said. Page 16. I slid a single-page printout across the mahogany. This is the bank's own portal trail. It shows user S. Vane opened the bankruptcy explanation file and closed it in 7 seconds. Then he maintained the freeze. That isn't diligence, that's leverage. Turn to page 20. I continued, my voice gaining strength. I was in my element now. The domain of competence. The commingling of $5,000. I have traced the digital footprint. The funds were withdrawn at 9:00 a.m. and returned at 4:30 p.m. the following Tuesday. I have attached a sworn affidavit from the venue stating the check was required, physically necessitating the personal withdrawal. It was a reimbursement, not a distribution. It has zero tax implication. Vane was reading faster now. His smugness was evaporating, replaced by the irritation of a bureaucrat realizing he missed a checkbox. This is extensive, Vane muttered. It is exhaustive, I corrected. I have also cross-referenced your own internal policy section 12B regarding small business variances. By freezing her accounts without this level of verification, you are currently in violation of your own service agreement. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany table. You have two choices, Mr. Vane. You can admit your algorithm made a mistake, unfreeze the funds immediately, and we walk away. Or Ms. Cook can take this audit report signed by me to the State Banking Commission and file a complaint for bad faith business practices. The room went dead silent. Vane looked at the report. He looked at me. He looked at Joanna, who was watching him with a terrifyingly calm smile. Ms. Cook, Vane said tightly. It seems there was a procedural issue in how the file was reviewed. It seems so, Joanna said. We will lift the freeze within the hour. Joanna stood up. She didn't gloat. She didn't scream. She simply nodded. Thank you for your time, she said. We'll show ourselves out. We didn't speak in the elevator. We didn't speak in the lobby. We walked out of the skyscraper and onto the busy downtown sidewalk. The sun was blinding. Joanna stopped in the middle of the crowd. People flowed around us. You were amazing, she said. She was looking at me like she'd never seen me before. I was accurate, I said, loosening my tie. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me lightheaded. No, you were a shark. A math shark. She laughed, a sound of pure relief. Nikolai, you saved my life, my business, everything. I just fixed the error. Stop it, she said, stepping closer. Stop pretending it's just numbers. You put your name on the line for me. You worked for 2 weeks straight. It was the right thing to do. It was more than that. She reached out and took my hand. Right there on the sidewalk, her fingers interlaced with mine. It wasn't a handshake. It was a claim. I'm buying you dinner, she said. And I'm paying. With my working credit card. I have a rule against clients buying me dinner, I said, looking at our joined hands. Good thing I'm not your client anymore, she countered. "The audit is done. The case is closed." She squeezed my hand. So she asked, her voice dropping a little, losing the PR polish and finding that warm, messy tone I had come to like. "What happens now?" I looked at her. I saw the fatigue in her face, the resilience, the spark. I thought about the quiet of her office, the smell of burnt hazelnut coffee, the way we fit together in that space. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. "The lease on my office is up next month," I said. She blinked. "Are you leaving?" "No, but Studio 4A is too small for me. And Studio 4B is loud." She smiled, a slow, dawning smile. I was looking at the floor plan. I continued, keeping my voice steady. "If we knocked down the non-load-bearing wall between them, the one we just soundproofed, it would make a double suite. Separate workspaces, shared coffee area, shared rent." I held up the key. "I did the math," I said. "It's a fiscally responsible decision. We can repurpose the acoustic foam for the exterior walls. Zero waste." Joanna laughed. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my neck, hugging me tight right there in front of the bank that tried to crush her. I held her steady and quiet, finally letting myself breathe like the last 2 weeks were over. "You and your math," she whispered against my ear. "Yes. Let's knock down the wall." I held her tighter, anchoring her in the crowd. The noise of the city was all around us, sirens, traffic voices. But for the first time in my life, I didn't mind the noise. For most of my life, I treated silence like a control. If I could keep the room quiet, I could keep everything clean. Joanna didn't bring peace. She brought noise, deadlines, and problems that didn't fit into neat columns. Somehow the work got done anyway. The wall went up. The case closed. The screaming stopped. And when she knocked on the wall for coffee, I realized I wasn't listening for quiet anymore. I was listening for her.